tools and how he learned from Jack how to do some maintenance work on his car. Daughter-in-law Beth Ann and Matt remember Jack's concern for their children, relating how they follow them around to be sure they didn't hurt themselves, and how the usually stoic German would get on the floor to play with his children. Jack had a special relationship with Sean, who was born without eyesight. Jack kept abreast of the latest research on blindness and joined one of the national associations for the blind. John, who as a teenager was in some respects an only child, as the others had left home to begin their own family, realizes that all Jack did for him helped him become the man he is today, and he is eternally grateful. He particularly recalls going to Redskins games with his dad. During the years, there were trips to New Jersey to visit Jack's parents and take care of other business. Jack and Ann always were welcomed by Margie and her husband Lou to their home and received the warmest hospitality. And now a little bit about Jack and the Navy. In the early 1900s, Theodore Roosevelt talked about a man being in the arena rather than being a critic of those who were the doer of deeds. And even if he should fail, it was so important to try. Jack was in the arena for more than 48 years, and his face was marred by sweat and dust and blood, as Roosevelt predicted for men of action. And Ann was with him every step of the way. Following his graduation from St. Joseph College and Officer Candidate School in Newport, Rhode Island, Jack was commissioned an ensign in the United States Navy and headed directly to his first ship, the LST Talladega. Subsequent shipboard tours were aboard the fleet oiler Neosho, the destroyer Cone, and the cruiser Richmond K. Turner. He also served at the amphibious base in Coronado, California, on an LST staff with the military assistance and advisory group in Ethiopia, and in the Pentagon, which most of you know has 5 sides on every issue. On a particular St. Patrick's Day, while working at the Pentagon, Jack wore a green tie with his navy blue uniform. A more senior officer stopped him and asked why he was wearing a green tie. "It's St. Patrick's Day," Jack replied. "Well, you're not Irish, you're German," the officer stated. Jack counted that he had lots of Irish blood in him. "Change the tie," the senior officer directed. Seemed like there were only 2 sides on that issue. One side didn't have much of a sense of humor. The tour in Ethiopia was especially interesting and challenging. While there, Jack and Ann mingled with royalty as they met Emperor Haile Selassie, his grandson, Commodore Dester, who was the chief of their navy that Jack was assisting, as well as a prince's daughter, who at a formal occasion was on the wrong end of the cork from a champagne bottle Jack was opening. Stephanie was born in Ethiopia after Ann was required to fly from Addis Ababa to the hospital in Asmara about a month before her due date, because the runway in Asmara had no lighting. They wanted to be sure there was no nighttime emergency birth. Jack was left at home to do his advisory group work as well as care with the 3 children that they had at that time. Jack and Ann were in Ethiopia when the revolt against the emperor began. Things were dangerous, and Jack returned to the United States with a piece of glass embedded in his face from a brick being thrown through a bus window he was riding. He was in the arena, and his face was marred by sweat and blood. Also, a fair amount of his military service was during the Vietnam conflict. People were serving their obligatory service and leaving the military. Not Jack. He had 26 years of commissioned service, and when he retired from the Navy, he spent some 22 additional years working on Navy issues in the defense industry. Thus, he was in the arena for 48 years, serving his Navy and his nation while spending himself in a worthy cause, to quote Roosevelt again. In 1963, President Kennedy came to the Naval Academy to speak to the midshipmen. During the course of his remarks, he said, "Any man who may be asked in this century what he did to make his life worthwhile, I think can respond with a great deal of pride and satisfaction. I served in the United States Navy." Jack certainly felt that way about his service. I turn now to his love of God. There can be no doubt that Jack had a deep and abiding faith in Abba, his heavenly Father. Jack and Ann and their 7 children and 13 grandchildren formed a large family circle, and in the middle of that circle was their God. And like any family, there were good times and some not so good times. And in all of those times, but particularly the latter, they turned to God for help and assistance. Wherever they lived, Jack was heavily involved in the church. As a member of parish council, a lector, a crucialista, and in any number of volunteer committee assignments, he assisted his church. Each parish they belonged to was better because Jack and Ann were there. In many families, the woman goes to church while the man stays at home. Not so with Jack, who was there every Sunday and often during the week, providing an example to his family and others of a practicing Catholic man. Jack was also immensely proud in a good way of all his children and their spouses, and would have liked to have been able to welcome Adam, John's fiancée, and Jay, Susan's intended, to the family. Before closing, I would like to recognize Anne. For any number of years, she helped to nurse her father prior to his death. Later, she cared for her mother for a long time, and most recently, she remained for hour upon hour at Jack's bedside. And you truly live the gospel message. On behalf of Margie and me, thank you for taking such wonderful care of our brother. And don't you worry about your own care. Just hours before Jack died, Mary Helen whispered in his ear, "I promise we will all take care of Mom." And knowing your family as I do, they will do just that. I will now close with the 23rd Psalm, with the Seaman's version of the 23rd Psalm, because it tells us something about Jack and where he is. The Lord is my pilot, I shall not dread. He lighteth me across dark waters. He steereth me in the deep channels. He keepeth my log. He guideth me by the star of holiness for his name's sake. Yea, though I sail in the thunders and tempests of life, I shall dread no danger, for thou art with me. Thy love and thy care, they shelter me. Thou preparest a harbor before me in the homeland of eternity. Thou anointest the waves with oil, my ship rideth calmly. Surely sunlight and starlight shall favor me on the voyage I take, and I will rest